I don't think people understand that the most famous man in history, the only ruler who never lost a battle, and who built one of the biggest empires in history, is also the cutie who named a city after his own horse. I'm talking, of course, about Alexander the Great. But why is he so great? Alex is born the most important Nepo baby of the 4th century BC, son of King Philip II of Macedon and his wife Olympias. The legends linked to Alexander's birth are just as sensational as he was. On the night of his conception, Olympias dreams that her womb is struck by a thunderbolt that causes a flame to spread far and wide. And supposedly Philip dreams of securing his wife's womb with a seal engraved with the image of a lion. A couple who dreams together stays together. Ancient commentators go wild with interpreting these dreams. They're like Swifties with Taylor's Easter eggs. Whether it means that Alexander is destined to conquer far and wide, or that he is the son of Zeus, or that Olympia was already pregnant before the marriage. We love ancient scandals. Or, which I find more likely, that it is the ambitious Olympias herself to feed the narrative of Alexander's divine parentage. Why? Because Olympia is only one of the many wives of the king. Wife number 4. But giving birth to Alex gives her the biggest promotion of her life. And sure enough, thanks to her prodigious kid, she becomes the main wife. Truth or not, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because Alex lives up to expectations, and from a prodigious toddler, grows up to be a prodigious kid. One time, King Philip is offered a beautiful horse, but no one is able to mount it. 10-year-old Alex understands that the horse is just afraid, asks to try, and sure enough, he tames him. Philip is so moved and he exclaims, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedon is too small for you." Spoiler alert, he's not wrong. Alex keeps the horse and calls him Bucephalus, oxhead. Bucephalus never leaves Alex's side, carries him through every battle, all the way to India. When he passes at age 30, Alex names a city after him, Bucephala. Alex receives the best education. He plays the lyre, rides, fights, hunts, and he loves reading. Pretty much any ancient philosopher volunteers to be his mentor.
Pick me. Choose me.
But the job goes to none other than Aristotle, who, listen to this, is like, "Philip, I'll do it if and only if A, you rebuild my hometown, Stagira, which Philip has pillaged, and B, repopulate it by buying and freeing all the citizens that have been enslaved." Big shout out to Aristotle. It was like a boarding school, like an ancient Eton, and it's here that Alex meets some of his lifelong best friends and future generals. Ptolemy, yes, the one that started the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt that leads to Cleopatra, and Hephaestion, Alex's best friend, and maybe, probably, something more than that. Aristotle teaches them about philosophy, medicine, morals, logic, art. It is thanks to him that Alex develops a passion for the Iliad and perhaps a slight fixation with war. Aristotle gives him an annotated copy, which later Alexander will carry in each of his campaigns. At 16, Philip was like, "You're a man now, out of school and into war," and he leaves Alex in charge of the kingdom while he's away fighting. At 16, I was barely in charge of myself. And 16-year-old Alex tames the Thracian revolt all by himself. And that's when he founds the first of a long list of cities named after himself, Alexandropolis. But he's a teen, so we forgive him the narcissism. From here onwards, he's always fighting alongside his father, and in one instance, apparently, even saving his father's life. In this period, Philip and Alexander are enforcing their control in nearby areas, like Thrace, Greece, and Illyria. After they defeat the Greek cities of Thebes and Athens, and conquer the Peloponneso, kicking out the Spartans,
This is Sparta!
nope, they create the League of Corinth, and Philip is proclaimed commander of this league. In other words, they have Greece. Once this is done, Philip announces his plan to attack the Persian Empire. This ancient obsession to conquer the Persians. I should make a video about it. But how did we get from this loving relationship of father and son, bringing war and destruction together as a team, to Alexander having to flee and go into exile? After Greece, Philip falls in love with the much younger Cleopatra Eurydice. And since he only has 6 wives, he's like, "Will you do me the honor of..." Now, this union is a big problem for Alex. Why? Because Alex is only half Macedonian. His mother, Olympia, is from Epiro, but the new wife, Cleopatra Eurydice, is full-blooded Macedonian. So any son she might have with Philip could have a stronger claim to the throne. Alex is like, "William here, I am no Harry." And Cleopatra Eurydice is also the niece of Attalus, Philip's close general. And during the wedding, Attalus gets a little tipsy, and he publicly prays the god that this union might bring a legitimate heir, thus implying that Alex is not. Alex, who is never in his chill era, throws a cup at him and he's like, "You villain." "You villain" is so satisfying. You should have a comeback. What am I then? A bastard? And that's when Philip stands up to defend Attalus. But he's also drunk and he falls. And young Alex insults him. He's basically like, "Dad, you're planning to conquer Persia. You can even walk straight." He immediately knows he went too far. He flees Macedonia, drops his mother off with his uncle in Epiro, and he seeks refuge in Illyria. Now, the king of Illyria deserves a mention. He's a gracious host host and welcomes him, even though Alex just defeated him in battle. Anyway, thankfully a mutual friend mediates between father and son, and in half a year they make up. And they do it just in time, because in 336 BC, they all go to the wedding of Alex's sister, Cleopatra. She's marrying Alex's uncle, the king of Epiro. So yes, she is marrying her own uncle. And at the party, Philip is assassinated by his bodyguard. Alex is proclaimed king on the spot. He's only 20. That's when the big purge begins, meaning Alex eliminates any, and I mean any, potential rival. Like the friend of the cousin of the god once looked at you in a way that didn't seem friendly. Now, obviously he eliminates Aptalus, the uncle of his new stepmom, who had insulted him at the wedding. And Alex's mother, Olympias, was even more savage. She has Philip's most recent wife, Cleopatra Eurydice, and her daughter Europa burned alive. It is to be said that after hearing about this, Alex is furious, because after all, Europa was his little stepsister. It is said, allegedly, might just be a mean ancient rumor, that Olympia poisons Arideus, Alex's older stepbrother, but didn't manage to unalive him. It left him with a mental delay, so Alex spares him. What a heart of gold. After Philip's passing, most territories he had conquered are like, this sounds like a good time to revolt again. Alex is advised to use diplomacy, and he's like, I appreciate your feedback, but I think I'll summon 3,000 Macedonian cavalry and head for Thessaly. After sedating the situation in Thessaly, he does the same in Greece. It's in this occasion that one of my favorite ancient encounters happens. Alexander meets the philosopher Diogenes in Corinth. Alex is like, what can I do for you? And Diogenes, who's lying out in the sun, is like, move, you're blocking the light. Shade. No, I mean literally shade. Thankfully, Alex has a sense of humor, and he's like, if I were an Alexander, I'd like to be Diogenes. At least we know he doesn't struggle with self-love. When the situation south looks chill, he turns north. It's the turn of Illyria. Remember the Illyrian king that had hosted him when he was in exile? Yeah, that friendship didn't last long. Anyway, he defeats them in no time. But guess what? Once again, we have problems south. The Greek cities are rebelling again, and each time it plays out like this. Thebes is like, okay, so we all agree we're all gonna rebel together. United front. And Athens and all the other Greek cities are like, yep, 100%. See you there at the battlefield. Be the ones wearing white tunics, and systematically, no one shows up. It's always Thebes who is like, I don't care, I'll just do it by myself. Unfortunately, this time Thebes really pays for it. Alexander destroys her to the ground. Then Alex is like, I'm out, gotta go conquer Asia. Antipater, you're my friend, I'll leave you in charge here. Antipater, who's older, he's been around since Philip, is like, boss, thanks, I'm honored, but may I suggest you wait to leave for the east and marry and make an heir first, you know, establish a succession line, that kind of And Alex is like, you may not. And finally, the legendary war with the Persian Empire begins, that every single Western population is obsessed with for some reason. Now, when his late father Philip had announced that he would attack Persia, from an ideological point of view, he presented it this way: I own Greece now. More than 100 years ago, Greece was invaded by Persia. It seems only fair that I take my vengeance for my people. So Alex sets off to do just that. But he's like, why stop at freeing the Greek cities of Asia Minor? I want to take the full thing. He demonstrates his intention of conquering the whole Persian Empire by throwing a spear into Asian soil and saying he accepts Asia as a gift from the gods. Literally. I accept. And if you haven't already noticed, when Philip chooses diplomacy, Alexander loves war. Too much Iliad is no good. And from here onwards, he's just unstoppable. He takes one city after another, never losing a single battle. At Gordium, one of the most famous legends about Alexander takes place. There was the famous Gordian knot that was famous for no other reason than the fact that nobody could untie it. Myth had it that the person who could would become king of Asia. Now Alex gets there, probably can't figure it out, so he simply takes out a sword and cuts it open. Literally, I'm king of Asia. At Issus, he defeats the king of the Persians, Darius, leaving not only his army to collapse and his treasure to be sacked, but also his wife, mother, and daughters. Then Darius offers him 10,000 talents to get his family and part of his territories back. And Alex is like, dude, I got your treasure, your army, and your family. You're in no position to dictate conditions. Also, I did this and this, so I'm king of Asia. He then takes Syria, the whole Levante area. The siege of Tyre is particularly brutal. All men are massacred, and all women and children are sold. He uses Tyre as an example to scare the other cities. And it works, because all the cities on the way to Egypt just surrender, with only one exception. Guess who? Gaza. Gaza was brilliantly fortified and strategically placed on a hill, to the point that the engineers in Alex's team are like, boss, I don't think that's possible. Telling Alex he can't do something just makes him want to do it even more. He's just man 101. So he is like, challenge accepted. It takes 5 months, 4 attempts, and a shoulder injury, but eventually Gaza falls. Just like in entire, men massacred, women and children sold. And Alex now adds Egypt to the empire he's built in the time that it took me to record this video. I'm not crying, you are. In Egypt, Alexander is welcomed as a liberator. They really didn't like the Persian occupation. And honestly, he gives the love back. He renovates the temples, builds new one to Egyptian gods, and he reforms the taxation system. And to be recognized as the new pharaoh, he makes sacrifices to the Egyptian gods and goes to the oracle of Amun-Ra, where he is pronounced son of Amun. While he's in Egypt, he funds, you guessed it, Alexandria, that is destined to become the capital of the Ptolemaic kingdom and the culture capital of the Mediterranean later on. But then Alex is like, Egypt, it's been real, but I'm also king of Asia. See? I gotta resume my war. He goes right to the heart, Mesopotamia. And at Gaugamela, today northern Iraq, he defeats Darius again. Darius flees again, this guy, to Ekbatana in modern Iran. And Alex chases him for a while until he's like, whatever, I'll catch him later. And he stops to conquer the one and only Babylon. Here he's called King of the World. I'm sure he loved that. But he can't stop. Seriously, I think he's addicted to the adventure dopamine. He takes Susa, another Persian capital. It was a very big empire, so there were many capitals. He takes Persepolis, the ceremonial capital that contains so much history, and he allows his men to loot it to the bone. During the sack, a fire breaks out and destroys the whole city. It's unclear if it was accidental or the result of Greek vengeance. Remember, the Greeks had bad beef with the Persians since the previous century. It's also unclear if Alex immediately regrets the looting and tries to stop the fire or not. Plutarch says he stops to talk with a fallen statue of the legendary Persian king Xerxes, as if it were a real person. He says, shall I pass by and leave you lying there because of the expedition you led against Greece? Or shall I set you up again because of your magnanimity and other virtues? Anyway, at this point he's like, shoot, I forgot about Darius. Let's go catch him. He can't really be king of the empire until there's another king roaming the streets. Alex is playing a game of catch me if you can with Persian king Darius. The game stops when Darius is betrayed by his Bactrian satrap. A satrap or satrap was like a governor, who takes him out and then proclaims himself his successor. Dude, no, that's not gonna work. And he launches a fully disorganized campaign against Alexander. Aw, that's cute. Alexander buries Darius with all regal honors, and he claims that while dying, he named him his successor. With the excuse of taking out Bessus, he just keeps going further into Central Asia. Today we could say Afghanistan. And along the way, he just keeps founding cities and calling them, yup, Alexandria. God. Until finally karma catches on to Bessus, who also gets betrayed and given to Ptolemy. And of course, Alex has him executed, with the bonus of showing off as Darius's avenger. And if this whole triangle reminded you of this later, more famous triangle, you're not alone. In the meantime, Alex is facing some internal problems. Despite his age, he's extremely culturally aware and politically intelligent, which always brings him to adopt some traits of the different cultures of his vast empire, incorporating them and mixing them with that, let's say, Greek way. A big one is proskunesis, either a symbolic kissing of the hand or of the cheek to a full prostration to the ground. It is the Persian way to show social superiority and establish rank. Alex takes on this practice right away. The problem is that for the Greeks, proskunesis is reserved to gods, and so it looks like Alex wants to deify himself. Many in his close circle have an issue with it. Apparently one night, Cletus the Black, who saved Alex's life in Granicus, comments on it. It turns into a fight, they're both super drunk, and Alex just takes him out on the spot. Within his court, many continue to criticize proskunesis. It seems to the point that eventually he drops it. Another thing that Alex's team doesn't love, he marries an Iranian princess, and of his 3 marriages, this first one with Roxana is the only one out of love, at first sight apparently. The other 2 with Stateira, Darius's daughter, and Parysatis are entirely political. Alex also has a profound love for his best friend and general Hephaestion. But on the nature of this relationship, scholars still very much debate, and it deserves its own video. Let's just say that when he passes, Alexander is devastated and dies soon after. If you guys are curious, I can talk about it in more depth. Another issue that Alex has to face are the plots against his life. Yeah, that would worry me too. That we know of, there were 2. Obviously, both fail, and Alex is not exactly merciful. He takes out anyone even remotely involved, like the cousin of the friend of the babysitter, the son of the plumber who works for the guy out. But back to expansion. We said he got to Central Asia at this point. Well, one morning he wakes up, he looks at the sun rising east, and he's like, let's go further east. God, he wants to start the Indian campaign. He's conquered the Persian Empire, now he wants to take the nearby areas in the Indian subcontinent. And areas such as Punjab in modern-day Pakistan just willingly surrender. With those who don't, he's like, that's cool, I'll just fight you off. And he does. He takes areas of, in modern term, Pakistan and Afghanistan. He beats the Indian king Porus at the Battle of Hydaspes, where he crosses the river Indus, officially entering Indian territory. Alex is impressed with Porus's bravery and makes him a satrap. And it is here that he founds a city and calls it said Bucephalus in honor of his late horse, who accompanied him in every battle for 30 years and had just passed away. Past Porus's territory, there are other big empires. The Nanda Empire, the Gangaridai Empire of Bengal. There's the heart of the Indian subcontinent. And they're probably looking at Alex being like, please don't come near us. And at the same time, Alex's army is like, dude, we've been following you for 10 years now. We don't want to cross the river Ganges and start this all over again. And Alex is not happy, but he eventually gives in. He's like, fine, we won't for now. And we're getting close to it now, as Alex will die very soon and in mysterious circumstances. And the to-do list he leaves unaccomplished is interesting. We left off that Alex is finally convinced by his army to take a break. His soldiers have been away from their families, their homelands for more than 10 years, and they kind of had enough. So he's like, fine, we're gonna stop for now. And just like Taylor gives $100,000 bonuses to her truck drivers, Alex pays off the debts of each of his soldiers and sends back to Macedon the veterans and the wounded. But the army completely misunderstands his intentions. They think they're being dismissed and they revolt. So Alex is like, I'll just take the Persian soldiers instead. Immediately the Macedonian beg for his forgiveness and they make up, they have a big party held in Susa. Alex plays matchmaker, but like to a serial level. He organizes a mass marriage. So romantic. Matching his senior Macedonian Greek officers with Persian noblewomen. It is no shocker that few of these marriages last a year. Alex then goes to Ecbatana to take the Persian treasure, and here's when things start to go south. After his best friend, let's say best friend, they might have been more than that, Hephaestion suddenly dies. It isn't clear how, either an illness or poisoning. Alex is devastated like he's never been before. He orders public mourning and organizes the most expensive funeral ever in Babylon. Alexander never really recovers from this loss. Also cause he doesn't get the time. He's like, I gotta keep my mind off things. Let's plan a war. So he sits down to map his expansion plans, which include the following. Get all the way to the Pillars of Hercules. Just an FYI, they were considered the end of the world. Invade Carthage and the Western Mediterranean. Cause why not? Build temples, and then more temples. This one's interesting. Cultural amalgamation. Transplant Europeans in Asia and Asians in Europe. Forgive me the use of modern concepts such as Asia and Europe. So they can mix and the empire can reach unity. Build a gigantic tomb for his father, bigger than the pyramids, circumnavigate Africa, and conquer Arabia. You know, your average bucket list. I need to point out that it is very hard to determine the veridicity of this list, and it is debated to this day. Alex dies suddenly at age 32 in mysterious circumstances, and the cause of his death has been tormenting scholars for centuries, and even ancient historians tell different tales. Plutarch says he drinks so much one night that he develops a fever that gets so bad over the span of 10 days that he isn't even able to speak, and that the anxious soldiers are allowed to file past him as he waves. The poor man is dying and they're making him wave for hours. According to Diodoro, Alexander drinks too much as part of a religious rite to Heracles, and after that he doesn't get a fever, but he just gets general pain and dies after a few days. I don't know about you, but I noticed one common denominator. Of course, it wouldn't be a thrilling story without the poisoning theory, which is also widely mentioned in ancient accounts. And all accounts tend to agree that in this case, it would be Antipater, the head of the plot. Remember the guy he left in charge of Macedonia? Yes, him. Because Alex had summoned him to Babylon, so he might have been scared of getting fired, or knowing Alex, something worse, so he might have made his move. But modern historians have plenty to say too, especially with the advantage of better scientific knowledge. In 2014, Schaap writes in the Journal of Clinical Toxicology that he might have drunk wine spiked with Vitrarum album, a kind of poison that has a prolonged course of action and would match the 10 days or so delay that most accounts speak of. So basically, it matches Alex's slow death. In 2010, it was also suggested as poison the water of the river Styx that contained calicemicin. I hope that's how you say it. A potentially mortal compound naturally produced by bacteria. Delightful. Natural causes have also been considered: malaria, typhoid fever, perhaps together with a bowel perforation, infections like meningitis, the West Nile virus, or simply acute pancreatitis. There were endless ways to die. There are still. Let's not forget, as I said before, that he was also not in the best mental space after the death of Hephaestion, which certainly didn't help. But the most interesting theory for me is the Guillain-Barré syndrome theory. That begs another big question. Was Alexander the Great buried alive? At the tender age of 32, Alex has built one of the biggest empires in history. In the span of 12 years, he's conquered Greece, the Persian Empire, Egypt, and he has dramatically shaped the future of the whole classical world. Now that's a lot for a 30-something-year-old. So what did he do to unwind? He drank. He partied, and then he drank some more. In Babylonia, which is like New York partying today. One night he drinks even more than usual. He decides to cure the hangover with even more drinking. Is that a thing? And suddenly he's bedridden, unable to talk, to move. It goes without saying that the great Arabian expedition he has been planning is not gonna happen. Mind you, when asked, who should have your empire, Alex? He answers, the strongest. Thanks, Alex, that's helpful. As soon as they announce his death, his close friends and generals start fighting over his body. I know that sounds weird, but having his body implied having legitimacy to power. So it was actually super duper important. They decide to go against his cultural tradition and mummify him. After 6 days since his passing, they go in to proceed with the mummification, and to their shock, they find that there is not a single sign of decay. And we're in the middle of a burning hot summer. At the time, without our modern scientific knowledge, this was interpreted as an apparent sign of Alex's divine quality. And I mean, he spent his life marketing himself as a god, so why not continue afterlife? But one of today's hypotheses is that Alex might have been accidentally buried alive. Some scientists argue he might have had the Guillain-Barré syndrome. I hope that's how you say it. It's a rare neurological condition by which you get temporary paralysis, but hear this, your mind stays fully aware. And that aligns perfectly with the description we get from ancient commentators. I talk about it in the previous part in this playlist. Just imagine being frozen, unable to communicate or move, but being fully there, being fully aware. Now the big question is, was he alive and simply paralyzed when they laid him down to rest? In support of this hypothesis is that in ancient times, they would only check for breath and not for a pulse. And breath might have been undetectable in his condition. Icing on the cake, Alex's tomb is nowhere to be found. It remains a mystery to this day. Some say it's in Egypt, some in Macedonia. Nobody has a clue. But to answer the question, what made Alexander the Great really so great? To answer that question, just look at the map. This is what his father left him with. Macedonia itself, of course, and the more or less solid control of the nearby areas. This is what he accomplished on his own by the age of 32. He's the only man, actually that's what I've been told, but if you know of someone else, please let me know, who never lost a single battle. And normally he was outnumbered, but his military genius was such that he could find the right strategy to win every single time. He always chose flexibility and maneuverability over quantity. That's what made him so ahead of his time. At Granicus, his first battle in Asia, he didn't use all of his forces. We think 13,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry against the gigantic Persian force of 40,000. But because of how strategically he placed his forces, he was still able to win, with Macedonian losses being much less than the Persian ones. The complete trust of his troops also played a very significant role, but he earned that trust by always being there. He was aware that his territories were getting so vast and his army so diverse, different languages, different weapons. He knew there was only one common denominator, one glue, himself. So he made sure to always be there in the battlefield, taking the same risks. He is the root and the main reason for Hellenization, which is the process of exporting the Greek culture as far as Central Asia. The reason why you find Greek influences as far as Pakistan, Afghanistan, with a true intent to merge cultures together. He just didn't get the time. So was he a borderline egomaniac? For sure. Would anger management be highly recommended today? Absolutely. Would I marry him and kiss, marry, kill? Nope. But he was truly great.